you so much for attending. This is our last in our sort of joint webinars between Aspire Hire and Study Hire this afternoon, and this one is on sort of helping sort of looked after children or those care leavers in accessing higher education. So you have myself and Colleen from the University of Hertfordshire and the University of Bedfordshire, representing Aspire Hire, sort of here to help assist and answer questions or sort of facilitate. And we have joining us Gasharan Sandhu from the Hertfordshire Virtual School. So I'll hand over to Gasharan just to sort of introduce herself and talk a bit about what we're going to be covering today.
Sorry, Emma, I've just sent you an email to share a slideshow. If you don't mind putting that onto the screen, that'd be great. But hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. I am Gasharan Sandhu. I work for Hertfordshire County Council, and I am the higher education coordinator that works with all care leavers that wish to go to university. And what I hope to do today is share a couple of videos that we have recorded with some of our graduates and some of our students that are currently still at university, just to give a little bit of an insight from a young person's point of view of how they found the service, what they found has gone really well, and what changes that they would have liked to see, so that you just kind of hear it from the voice of the young person. So we could go straight into to show you the first video. It's a graduate video, so all the students on there have graduated with us over the years. And they're just going to give you a little bit of an sort of insight to what they have experienced whilst being with us and what value they've had of getting a degree. So if we can go straight into that, Emma, that'd be great.
Well, I was born in Afghanistan and came here when I was 14. So I always wanted to study medicines and become a doctor. So I always knew that, you know, to become a doctor, I needed to go to university.
So I was 10 years old when I first knew I wanted to go to university. I was so enthusiastic to get into law and be a lawyer, and I've always wanted to be in law or do some work in law.
It was when I was at college. I was doing my A-levels and all my friends were talking about what they wanted to do in the future, and I was thinking about the subjects that I studied at the time and what I wanted to study further, and I decided that psychology was what I wanted to do.
When I was in year 6 in primary school, I decided that I wanted to go to Oxford University because I wanted to not prove everyone wrong, but essentially, yes, prove everyone wrong and kind of demonstrate that I was worth more than people thought I was worth.
I first knew that I wanted to go to university when I was about 10, because I always wanted to study prosthetics and I wanted to study makeup as well. So I looked at the sort of route that I'd need to take, which was to do a sort of artistic do GCSEs and then A-levels or college, and then going to university.
So when I was actually at school, it was the first time I got involved with virtual school. I was actually failing my A-levels at the time, and it was so important for me to get the support that I needed. Virtual school provided like a stepping stone for me to put things in gear in order for me to get to the career that I was going to. I applied to university, got some offers through the support. They were there every day, and it was fab.
I had a lot of support from teachers, and like virtual schools were always there. Like if I ever had like problems, I would go to them and they would always try and find something to put in place to make me feel better about things like exams and things.
Well, when I came here, I couldn't speak English, and in order to pass my GCSE and A-levels, I needed a lot of support for English, and I had a teacher coming to teach me English from virtual school, so that was the first support I needed. There was quite a few people involved. Firstly, my foster parents, they really encouraged and helped me to work hard and study. School teachers were really supportive as well. Social workers helped, and the teachers, the extra teacher that I get from virtual school who would come weekly or in a month's time and help me and ask me if I need any help. So yeah, there was quite a few people involved.
So I definitely relied on my teachers and their support, both from a welfare perspective and from an academic perspective. And I also did some work with the virtual school, which, well, it was, a lot of it was kind of under the title of Aim Higher, and it definitely did remind me that regardless of my background, it was reasonable and possible for me to pursue higher education.
And the support that I needed was probably from my foster carers and also my PA that I had at the time. Just sort of having the people that believe in you and tell you that you can do it, because you don't always believe in yourself. So it's just having sort of people that believe in you and the person to say that you can do it, and sort of pushes you to work that a little bit harder to get the qualifications that you need.
So I went to Middlesex University in Hendon. I took on a bachelor's in law.
So I went to the University of Birmingham. I studied English literature first and, promptly figured out that I wanted to do something else. So I switched over to philosophy, and I thoroughly enjoyed that.
I'm a graduate from Bournemouth University who studied psychology. This month I'm going on to study social and applied psychology at Kent University.
Well, for my first degree, I studied neuroscience at King's College in London. Then I took a year out, and now currently I'm in my second year studying medicine at Keele University.
So I went to the Arts University of Bournemouth, and I decided after a year and a term that I felt a little bit isolated and it wasn't quite right for me. So I took some time out, which I was supported by with the virtual school. And then I came back after a couple of years of working and finished my degree in London, coming out with a first class honours degree. And now I'm going on to UCL, just started, to do a postgrad in teaching, and then I'll be able to be a qualified makeup teacher.
So I graduated in 2016, and actually in September 2018, I went back to law school to do a master's in law.
I am going to pursue a master's degree shortly, and currently I'm getting some real life experience working for the Office of the Public Guardian.
I was awarded first class honours with a special award of excellent contributions to the Department of Neuroscience at King's College London.
Yeah, I got a first class degree in the end, but not without some trials and tribulations.
So I'm actually a trainee solicitor today at a firm in Hertfordshire, which I love, and can't wait for the future to qualify.
I would say that every young person deserves to do well, and with the help of the right support in place, I think they can achieve. And I would say I'm really lucky and thank everyone to be there and help me, and the support system that is in place.
I'd probably just want to give a message to all of the children and young people in care watching this, and to say that you can do it. If I can do it, which I did, that just believe in yourself, because we're all capable and we're all really resilient and we can all get there.
Great. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed that video. It was just to give an insight of what some of the graduates have said over the years, and we are still working with some of them, like Gabriella, Nisa, who's doing medicine. We're still actually supporting them because of the length of their degree course is just so long that we're still with them. But generally, I mean, I've been doing this job for sort of like 8 years now, and each year I've had to change, adapt and develop the role so that it meets the needs of the young people that I'm working with. Each cohort is very, very different, and in particular when I'm doing their initial assessment to figure out, you know, what sort of support they need whilst they're at university. It can be sort of, you know, I kind of sort of mark it from a minimum intervention to a sort of high intervention, and I know exactly at what intervals throughout the year I need to remain in touch with them. But generally the role is kind of very, very sort of wide and broad. I do everything from starting from, I think there was a question on there about the Aim Higher, but I attend the Year 11 Aim Higher, where I initially meet these young people who have high aspirations, who are considering university, and I deliver a few workshops and a presentation which starts to get them to think about what sort of support that they will have from Hertfordshire Council when they are looking to go to university, and also having a named member of staff who they can come to for with any questions. So generally the initial interaction begins then, and then I follow it through right till sort of as soon as they start year 12, whether that's a level 3 course at colleges or whether they're going to sixth form. As long as they've sort of gone onto the next year after their GCSEs, I start making contact with them and exploring what it is that they want to do after they finish their A levels or their BTECs or diplomas or whatever they are studying, and kind of map up like a sort of almost like a road journey for them of what are the needs that they need to do to get from A to B. So it could be anything to do with looking at the courses, open days, supporting them with transport, looking at you know, the criteria of the course, you know, in terms of the going a little bit deeper, contacting universities, establishing the assessment part of it, you know, because some of the students don't like too much examination because they don't feel they can cope. So it's about identifying that. But fundamentally, it's about matching a course to their career aspirations and making sure that they can achieve it. And we're not putting them out there to come back failing or not being able to cope, because the biggest difficulty that we have is once they've gone to university, the moment it doesn't work out for them, they are then returning to us at Hertfordshire Council. They are then having to look for work, and they're then having to secure their priority housing with the council, which is all very sort of mature, high responsibility, independent choices, which sometimes these young people are not ready for. So it's really, really important that if they've gone to university, we need to make sure that they stay there and they complete their degrees. And that's primarily what I do, is securing the transition, making sure that they are positively moving forward. And that's not year by year, it's term by term, because we do find Christmas can be a very sort of delicate period for young people, where we might lose some of them, or the attendance might drop, or they're starting to fail and things like that. So it's really important to have a very close-knit relationship with these young people to make sure that we know at what interval there might be any crisis points for them. In addition to that, obviously anything to do with accommodation, finances, careers, employment choices, working on their portfolios beyond university, looking at their, you know, sort of their CVs, helping them create LinkedIn profiles. So I think what I'm just generally about to say, anything you can imagine that helps that individual progress. So I kind of, you know, take on the role of a corporate parent very seriously. So I say that, you know, Amy is going to university, she's starting year 1. Where do I want her to be in by year 2? Where do I want her to be after year 3? You know, where are there going to be more jobs for her, looking at geographical areas for her, signposting her to certain employers, and kind of mapping the journey for her, or for any individual. So it's a kind of like a jack of all trades, but not a master as such, because I'm always forever updating my knowledge and looking into things that I need to be able to share with young people. But I am now a virtual trainer too, so I do deliver training to these young people. I deliver awareness trainings on finances and debt. I give a sort of training on things that they need to be sort of considering. So lots to do with money, absolutely loads to do with money. You know, I actually was working out with one of my young people to see how much money that they get to go to university. And one of my students almost gets collectively with loans, bursaries, benefits, almost £21,000 in a year. So trying to help that individual cope with that large amount of money that they're not used to, but also educating them and training them and making them understand that when they graduate, they may not get a job straight away that will give them that much money. So being balanced, saving money for a rainy day, making sure they're not using credit cards, overdraft facilities, that their credit reports are good. It's a huge job with each individual. And that's what I primarily sort of look into. But before I continue, I'm happy to start taking some questions, because sometimes that's easier to get a bit more of an insight to what I do.
Yes, we did have a question from Rebecca, and she said, how does this work mesh with the support offered through social care, especially PAs?
Is it on the group?
It's on, yeah, that's in the chat there.
So with PAs, I work collectively with PAs, the Leaving Care PAs, and I jointly work with the individual. I focus on education and finance, whereas they focus on all the emotional well-being, accommodation after they finish their degrees, and things like that. But what we do collectively is something called the Pathway Plan, which I'm sure you're all aware of. And that is where we work in partnership together to make sure we are recording everything that young person, the support they need. I personally hold caseload conferences with all the Leaving Care PAs that are working with my young people, just to make sure we are sharing the right information. And sometimes there's things that I can miss out because I'm just focused on the education and the finance side of stuff. Sometimes there can be something that's impacting their lives that will not enable them to complete their degrees or complete their qualification. So that's where we work quite closely. But yeah, in terms of support that they offer, it's totally different to the support I offer. I can't do my job without them, and they can't do their job without me. So it's a great partnership.
And yeah, we had a couple of questions come through sort of on sign-up forms as well, so I kind of highlight those. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, either pop them in the chat, or if you want to ask Sharon sort of directly, do feel free to kind of unmute yourself if you wanted to ask. But so one of the questions was, probably you can cover this quite quickly, you're talking about money. So what's the extra financial support available for care leavers attending university?
So each of the universities offer a care leavers bursary, and it can really vary from, you know, sort of £200 a year to £7,000 a year. It all depends what university they choose. I personally do not like young people looking at the bursary, because that shouldn't be their deciding factor to go to uni. But yeah, there are a huge amount of bursaries and scholarships available to care leavers. It's just about looking at the right place. In addition to that, if they're going from Hertfordshire Council and they're knowing to us, they have a bursary from us, which is £5,500 each year. And I monitor and administrate that. So I intend to do budget plans with all my students up to 3 times a year, just to make sure we are capturing everything that we need to capture to make sure that they're okay. As you can appreciate, certain courses are quite energetic. They're 9 to 5, and you know the young people need full of energy. So obviously making sure that they have the right dietary requirements, giving them extra support with things like that always goes really helps with them actually staying motivated. And in addition to that, there's local charities. Depending on what university to go to, each area has like small little charity funds which offer a range of sort of you know, whether it's a financial package or support with transport or getting you a bus pass. It all really does vary, but that's part of the whole planning with the young person, is that once we know which university they're going to, we can then talk to them about the bursary, send in the relevant evidence, so that they can get it on time. We look at the charities, then we find out what's available to them, and we make all the applications necessary.
Perfect. So I had a couple of questions actually about that. So that's good, because you kind of answered all of the questions about sort of where to look for additional sort of financial support. Colleen's actually raised her hand, so I don't know if she had a question she wanted to ask.
Yes, actually, I was going to ask one of the questions that was pre-submitted, and that is, how can a school and home work together to be aspirational, even if carers don't have a degree level experience themselves?
Sort of in short, I would say that as much as we like to do with schools, as much as virtual school, we like to work with these young people. You know, it does really come that wherever they're living, whoever they're spending their most time with, they're constantly returning to them to get advice. So what I personally do is I actually work with the foster carers to get the information across to the young people, by sending online software packages where they can be searching, brainstorming, looking at different career paths, quizzes, things like that. But where a foster carer says to me that they have no knowledge in higher education, they've not had a foster child that's gone to university yet, I spend a lot of time in explaining the whole process to them so that they are encouraging the young person at key dates and at key intervals to complete applications, to do the research, to contact the relevant professionals. Because once they're at youth school, the work is being done there. When they are with me, the work's also being done there. But when they're at home, they need that support from the foster carers, and that's where we find our developmental work, is that we need to train foster carers to be more sort of advanced in understanding what the whole procedure is, when it starts in year 12, and by summer of year 12, what are the activities that should have been completed to make that individual confident about their choices.
That's really useful, thank you. Actually, it's, I think that really answers that question, and useful to know maybe working with the foster carers is kind of a key link that schools could also provide more information there.
One of the things at Hertfordshire we are working on at the moment, and it's come about from these young people that we have recorded, what you'll find is a lot of them say that going to university, the idea of going to university came to them when they were around about 10 years old. And where we have confident care leavers who will pursue their dream, who will continue speaking to teachers and relevant professionals about their career path from the age of 10 and up, there will be some care leavers that actually might be shy, reserved, who don't feel as confident, and they might bury their idea of going to university because they don't think they're up to it. So one of the things that we are working on at the moment is reaching out to primary schools and working in collaboration with them to raise more awareness of what care leavers can achieve with the relevant support. So that is in the pipeline, because we recognise there is a gap there.
That's interesting, because actually one of the questions we had that came through was how can we encourage primary schools to kind of start those high quality conversations? So that's something you're starting sort of as a virtual school.
Yeah, it's happening. I've been in communication with a range of professionals and head teachers, etc., to kind of identify how we will develop this work. But it's definitely in the planning stages, and we see the gap, which is the key thing. We know there's a gap there. We need to be really pushing even every single care leaver who is considering university, that they all have an equal chance. And we can only do that if they know who we are and how we support care leavers, and how we can get our mentors to come and mentor them right through to sort of secondary and so on.
And so Rebecca's asked a couple of questions. I'll probably ask the second question first, because it seems to relate to what we're discussing. So she says,
Sure.
Does the virtual school specifically support foster carers to encourage sort of this aspiration before Key Stage 5? So you're saying you're working with primary schools, and yeah, do you sort of work with foster carers to support that university aspiration before they get to sort of sixth form as well?
Yes, we do. So when these young people, I'll go back to the aim higher, and I believe there was a question on the chat about aim higher. When we have identified the cohort of young people who are achieving high and have aspirations to go to university, or could possibly go to university, during those aim higher sessions, we are in communication with the foster carers who are part of sending these young people to these aim higher sessions. And the journey then continues from there onwards. We stay in communication with them too, and just kind of keep them ticking a box to see whether these young people are still achieving high grades and they're still talking about university. But fundamentally, is that when they have their CLA reviews with their social workers, I am mentioned to the foster carers to reach out to me if the young person is kind of confused. I mean, I'm having communications with year 11 students already who are thinking about university, but they're so confused about money and so confused about where they're going to stay that they want the answers now. And that's where the awareness happens. So the social workers really push the service through the CLA reviews with foster carers and schools, etc. And then we have obviously the residentials that we deliver. We do aim higher, which is for year 11s. We do aim higher for year 12s. So through those, we are meeting all the criteria that we need to be able to not only sort of speak to the young people, but the professionals around them, and also their foster carers.
Thank you. And someone actually did ask sort of what the Aim Higher programme involves. So would you be able to give sort of a really brief overview?
Yes, I don't deliver that, but the 16 plus virtual school team do, and it's almost like a 2-day event where they go and they stay in one of the university facilities. They experience all aspects of university life. They focus on their maths, English and science. which is the 3 core subjects that they are, we have tutors on site who run different sessions with these young people. I go in, I deliver sessions about, sort of, looking beyond, sort of GCSEs. Then we have somebody go in to talk about employment, apprenticeships. So those two days is just giving these young people a whole host of information that they go away with to review and think about, but also to meet the key professionals from the service to reach out to in the future.
Fantastic, thank you. And still got quite a few questions actually that came in beforehand. So one of them I think is quite interesting is so what are some of the common mistakes that are made when sort of on this topic? So I suppose trying to encourage sort of care leavers to access university. Yeah, are there any common mistakes that people make?
Yeah, there is actually. One of the biggest one is that if they are achieving high at A levels, or whether achieving high whilst they're at sixth form, professionals generally assume the natural progression is university, and there's a lot of pressure on the individual to go to university. When I come in and I have a different conversation, which is not always independent, I never have it amongst professionals because I need to get to know the young person. And from my personal assessment, it becomes very apparent that they're not sure about university. Now, the biggest mistake, like I said previously, is happening if we almost force or encourage too much, and this young person goes to university. If it doesn't work out, if they're not happy and they wish to return, they're returning to no foster carers. They are returning to no secure accommodation. They're returning to a life on sort of the first 6 to 5 months of their life on benefits and their priority housing, which they secure via the council. And that can be a really dull place for somebody that had totally a different vision for the future. So the common mistakes can be is that sometimes these young academics are pushed too much, and maybe university is not the right progression at that particular time. We have a lot of care leavers return to us when they're in their 20s and they have done employment, they've experienced life, and they're like, right, we definitely need to go to university to get from where we want to get to. And at that point, it's the right time for them. So that is probably one of the biggest common mistakes that does happen. Other than that, I would say is that a lot of students go to universities where they know somebody. As you can appreciate, care leavers, they get quite lonely. They don't necessarily have people to return to, families or friends. So if they are aware of a friend that goes to a particular university, they will tag along because it's comforting knowing that they know somebody. But that doesn't mean that university is right for them. We've had examples where 2 young lads went to Southampton. One was succeeding really well, the other wasn't. They ended up choosing the same course, the same accommodation. One decided to leave university and the other one then thought, well, actually, there's no place for me now. I think I need to go as well. But when he returned home, unfortunately, he had to secure his housing. He had to secure go into benefits, and ultimately got very depressed, and mental health declined drastically.
Thank you for sharing that. Sorry, I was just another pre-question that is related to that was, can university accommodation be extended over holidays for young people who can't go home? So I was wondering if you can answer that for who.
Yes, the majority of the universities, they have a 51-week rule of where students can stay. The only difficulty with that is that so if they're living in halls already and they wish to stay there over summer, they may not be asked to move into a different block or a different set of halls, because during the summer they're renovating, they're repainting rooms, getting ready for the next cohort. So then you can have that shift, which can be unsettling for some of our young care leavers. What I advise though, and what I've always sort of promoted and insisted on, is if they are happy to go into shared housing in year 2 or year 3, we like to secure that as early as possible, so they move straight from halls in the summer straight into their accommodation, the year 2, the year 3 accommodation, and they feel settled for the remaining of the summer before university starts again. That way they're only moving once, and they don't, and they can make it their home. They can sort of decorate, get the relevant stuff that they need to be fully settled and be in the right space of mind for September. But generally the rule is the universities do have space for them, and they tend to, what they do try to do actually, which is very nice, is they try to, all students that are staying over summer, they try putting them in one block so that they have someone to talk to or share the kitchen with, or, you know, that someone's constantly there.
That's really helpful. And actually, we had another accommodation question. I think you said you knew you might get some on accommodation and finances.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so yeah, I think this is the last of the sort of pre-questions. Was can accommodation deposits be waived or adjusted for care leavers?
Some universities do, not all universities. Currently, I'm paying, because obviously we're in that cycle of we're securing accommodation for students. I'm currently in the cycle of paying £250 at a time to secure their accommodation. But there are universities who don't require anything from care leavers. It all depends on the universities, and it's reviewed more or less every summer of what they can and can't offer care leavers.
Perfect, thank you. And actually, I did just notice Rebecca had submitted a question in the chat, which was more about the virtual school actually, rather than students specifically, but was how is the virtual school sort of funded and the council bursary funded? Sort of where does that funding come from?
Well, it's funded, well, virtual school as a team that we have, so, you know, in terms of which budget it comes through, I won't be able to reveal that information naturally, but we're a big team within the virtual school, and with a caseload of almost 100 now that I have that are going to university, the council recognises that, you know, it's a success, and to invest money in these students is vital, because they're only been coming back to society and getting jobs and bettering their aspirations. But generally, I manage a large budget which is secured for care leavers. But you know, when we divide the budget up and we work out, you know, how it's absorbed throughout the year, it does go very quickly. So it does seem like a lot of money to start off with, but actually, when you break it down, it goes. There are other local authorities who offer a complete different package to us, but they don't have someone like me in post to monitor the finances. So like you have some other local authorities that pay foster carers a retention secure money so that students can return to them over the holidays. And they also pay for their full year accommodation whilst they're at universities, and that you're talking sort of over £7,000 to £8,000 a year. So there are local authorities that invest hugely into accommodation because they find that that's valid, so that the young people feel they are at home and they've got somewhere secure to return to. Whereas here in Hertfordshire, what I do with that budget is I actually make it very personalised. So that's why I do a budget plan 3 times a year with each student. So if you times that by 100 students, I'm constantly working on finances, and like a parent would, questioning them, what is the money for, how it's going to help them, why have they made that mistake, can I look at your, you know, bank statement, can I look at your credit file. You know, it's a very personalised approach, because we're educating them, we're trying to make sure that they don't get themselves in debt once we leave them, but also we are giving them all the resources they need and to succeed, to get their first or their 2-1 degrees at universities. But unfortunately, I can't reveal how the budgets work. That's not my place to say.
Yeah, that's understandable, but it's interesting to know, obviously, each local area will have, the local authority have their own approach. It's going to be very.
They do. It's and you know what, it's very vast, and you know, some local authorities only offer the minimum 2,000, which is in the guidance, local government guidance. But that's 2,000 spread across the 3 or 4 year degree course, and that's it. And there's nothing else. So yeah, it does really vary from local authority to local authority.
So we have got time if anyone had any other questions. I mean, I know you also had another video of some different student testimonies to show, but I don't know if anyone had any other questions they wanted or issues they wanted to kind of get Sharon's thoughts on. Do feel free to unmute if you wanted to ask kind of directly, or do type it in the chat if you had anything that you wanted to ask sort of specifically. And I actually did have a question. I was sort of thinking about, if we're working, sort of thinking about secondary schools, is there anything like top tips that maybe you could give to teachers or staff in the school that, you know, things they should think about, or things they should try and help their students with if they know they've got sort of a student in the care system who might be trying to go to university?
Well, currently they're doing a great job. So, you know, they have got care leavers high on the agenda, which is great to know. But we have PAs, education workers linked to each of the secondary schools. So they work very closely with, you know, the relevant professionals. So it's always information sort of drip fed back to me anyway. So that partnership working has been happening for a long time. But one of the things that I also do is obviously I submit. I have a leaflet which I send out to head teachers every year just to raise awareness that, hey, I'm here, this is what I offer. If there's any questions, if there's any students that you feel could benefit from talking to me earlier rather than waiting for their referral to come through, I'm happy to do so. So yeah, but generally we've got virtual school presence in all schools, so it's we reach out to them anyway.
Perfect. So that's really interesting. So that's kind of the Hertfordshire approach seems to be working quite well, because you've got a long list of students on the previous video who've all gone successfully to university, which is great.
Yeah, I'm currently trying to find all these students on LinkedIn and Google to find out what their destinations have been over the I'm doing a big research from the last 10 years and seeing where these young people have reached to, and it's fascinating to see what's coming up. It's a very proud moment for us because they are on some very high paid professional jobs and doing extremely well. Some have gone on to have families and still continue with their career. So yeah, it's really good, but I'll be sharing that research in probably sort of after summer once it's all published.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there anywhere we could go? So if we wanted to find sort of those published results, would it be yourself or the sort of Hertfordshire Virtual School that will be publishing that?
Well, I'm obviously currently completing the report. So once that's completed, it will go to sort of the relevant marketing team who will then publish the report naturally, and it will be on the website. And obviously I'll be circulating it amongst all professionals just to kind of say, hey, look what we've done. A proud moment for us, where all these young people have gone to.
Colleen, you had another question you wanted to raise?
Yes, it's excellent to see the amount of support that these young carers receive, and specifically within Hertfordshire. I'm wondering, would the research that you're doing, would something similar be happening in other areas? Because there might be other areas that are attending today, like from other schools, so Bedfordshire, Northamptonshire, or one of these study hire areas.
Do you mean in terms of research of destinations for care leavers?
For care leavers, yeah, the research.
I'm not aware of it. No, as far as I'm concerned, I'm the only one that's doing it so far. I do attend like sort of Eastern regional meetings, which we discuss sort of new pieces of work, and yeah, I have been told I'm the only one that's actually looked into destinations over the last 10 years. But yeah, I don't even know numbers of how many other local authorities have seen graduate over the last 10 years. There is no way of sort of finding that information out without requesting it directly from the sort of the various departments. But there's no piece of work out there that has absolutely sort of declared or published to share information with.
Okay, thank you.
But it might be a good piece of work to happen.
That's what I was thinking, yes.
Yeah, just to see how other sort of local authorities and how many care leavers are going through the door of university and how many are graduating and actually progressing onto solid employment. Yeah. I mean, we've currently seen so far, I think there's 160 students now who have graduated through us. And some of them have done a second degree also. So, it's also been, a double whammy really. And this year we've got a figure of 31 students going to university, which has been the highest number since I've been here. So it's progressing quite high.
No, it sounds remarkable. But yes, it is good for any out there that are tuned in from other areas to try and contact their virtual schools and see what sort of support they're able to provide and what stats we can get. Thank you.
Yeah, so I didn't know if anyone else had any other questions or anything they wanted to raise. We did have quite a few questions to get through actually, which was good to know that hopefully we've been able to answer sort of some key burning points that people had. Yeah, so any other questions? If not, I know you've got another video to sort of show that maybe would be a nice sort of final point, because as you said, when we were discussing planning, sort of putting this together, that actually hearing from the students themselves is really vital and really important, because they kind of give you the best picture
Well, any training I do, whether it's with foster carers or whether it's going and seeing younger children, etc., I always take students with me to help me present, because they do listen and hear, and they like to share their concerns and anxieties more with the sort of mentors, and then that's fed back to me so I can reassure them. But yeah, there's not a single session I deliver without them. You know, it's their voice that really matters.
Yeah, so yeah, what we could do then is share sort of the second sort of clip that you had, and then any final questions that come out of that on sort of round up. So I'll share that sort of final sort of video clip.
I was 10 years old when I wanted to go to university, guys. And I went into care when I was 12 years old. And despite my tumultuous relationships that I had with my family members and the environment that I was in, I still remained determined and driven to get into the legal sector. And I knew that the best way to do that was to go to university. Literally overnight, I went into care, and the teachers were great in adapting to this and the quick change that they had to make. This meant that I was not coping very well with this change, and for that it was recognized, and I was allocated my own self-learning pods where teachers would bring me work that was required to be done during classes and out of classes. And not only that, I had a learning assistant to assist me with any questions that I had when I was trying to do the work. But also, they recognized that I was not able to sit my exams with everybody else in the halls, and I sat my exams somewhere completely different, still under exam conditions. But that helped me to deal with everything that I was going through and all the changes that I was dealing with. I went to Monk's Walk School and I completed 7 GCSEs graded between A to C. I would recommend that there be a course or a teaching segment, perhaps a video like this, given to teachers, just so they're aware about the changes that could happen to any child, and they could turn into a child looked after overnight, which would also assist them to know if there are behavioural issues or if there are emotional issues, or their moods are up and down during the day. They would know the reasons why. I went to college and studied business with law. My biggest hurdle at the time was that I was underperforming and I was not en route to achieving the grades required to go on to university. That is when I was allocated a virtual school PA who came in and spoke with my tutors to arrange out of hours tutoring, which would assist me to reach the grades required. There was coursework missing, there was failed exams, and not only that, I had not received my acceptance to my top 2 university choices. I went to Middlesex University and I studied a bachelor's in law. Some of the hurdles that I faced is that I chose to access my priority housing prior to starting university, and this meant that I had to learn how to budget for rent, food, and expenses. I was also managing a part-time job. I also had coursework deadlines and revision for exams. But I think one of the biggest hurdles that I faced was that I didn't live on campus, and so I felt that I always missed an element of the university experience, which would be the social life. I believe that I was very fortunate enough to be determined and know the career path that I had chosen. However, it was great to have my virtual school coordinator who was very well versed in the higher education system and process and was able to provide any advice and answer any questions that I may have. But not only that, she had a great track and report system to keep me in line with university. So, such as checking up on how my grades were, have I passed my exams, and all the way through to how was graduation, did I graduate, which was fantastic.
The best part of my education journey is I've been able to obtain my undergraduate and postgraduate qualifications. It's the sense of achievement and success, and also determination that through my trials and tribulations, I've been able to achieve my goals.
My name's Megan, I'm 22 years old and I went into care when I was 14. I realised I wanted to go to university when I was 19 years old, so I was doing an apprenticeship at that time, and although the apprenticeship was really good, it wasn't until sort of the end of my apprenticeship when I realised that being a teaching assistant wasn't sustainable enough, and I wasn't earning enough money, and there wasn't that much progress within that unless I wanted to be a teacher, which I didn't. So I kind of had to take a step back and realise that I need to attend higher education in order to make a better life for myself. Personally, I think that teachers need to push their young people a bit more and to aspire to go to higher education. For me, there were some teachers that were very supportive, but there was also some teachers that wasn't that supportive. So I think it's about having the consistency between the teachers. And also when I was at school, I think I was pushed into doing an apprenticeship more than going to university. So there is an example where, you know, I wanted to attend the university assembly, but the teachers advised me to go to the apprenticeship assembly, so I wasn't that informed about higher education, which is why I went down the apprenticeship route. But I think that teachers need to be more supportive and encouraging for young people to attend higher education. I think the virtual school definitely inspired me, and my personal advisor inspired me to attend higher education. And I think the route that the course that I did, which is social work, I think stemmed from the fact that I had really good social workers growing up, and I was able to, I think that I wanted to give something back because I know what a difference they can make. So I wanted to study that at university. So I'd say that my social workers and the virtual school inspired me. Yeah, so when I was doing my apprenticeship, when I started to think about attending higher education, I felt a bit lost because obviously when I was at secondary school, I was attending the apprenticeship talks rather than the university talks. So I didn't really have that much information about how to do a personal statement for uni and how to get UCAS points and stuff. So what I did was I emailed the teacher that was in charge of UCAS, the UCAS lead and stuff at school, at my secondary school, and I asked if I could have a brief meeting with her, just so that she could talk to me and go through how to write a good personal statement and how to, you know, apply for university. So they were able to take that time out and have me back in for a meeting to talk about that, which I felt was really positive, and it was really good that they listened to my aspirations and stuff. The main hurdle that I've had to overcome is I've got quite low confidence and low self-esteem. So I feel like when at university, if I was getting good grades or doing well at placement, I needed somebody to help me realise that and boost my confidence a bit. And I think that's the main hurdle that I had to overcome, was my self-doubt and my confidence in what I was doing. When I was at university, I experienced lots of personal difficulties, which sort of hindered my ability to concentrate fully in my education, and it deeply affected my self-esteem and my confidence levels, which meant that there were times at university where I wanted to drop out, and there was lots of times where I didn't think that I would be able to make it through to the end of my university, the 3 years. So what I had to do was I spoke to the virtual school lots over the phone, and we arranged lots of meetings so that I was able to talk through my worries and my personal difficulties, and we figured out ways of how the virtual school could support me to get through to the end. And I think that is one of the highlights of my university experience, is the fact that I've actually got this far, because throughout university I didn't think that I would ever make it to 3rd year, and I think that the support from the virtual school enabled me to get this far.
Got about sort of 5 minutes or so left. If anyone had any sort of final questions or anything they wanted to ask, or anything they wanted to raise before we kind of finish up. So I don't know if there's anyone who had any sort of final thoughts or anything that they wanted to check with Sharon while we had her sort of here with us. No, it looks like you've just answered all of their questions. That's what it is, you just said.
Well, if there's any more, you know, I'm happy for my email to be shared, and I'm happy to have, you know, sort of further conversations. So if there's anything, just ping me a message over.
Oh, brilliant, thank you. That's so useful. And I think I'll certainly be really interested to read kind of your report looking at sort of the destinations of students as well. I think that'd be really helpful for all of us who work with young people to kind of see how your work at the virtual school sort of impacted them and where students have ended up. That'd be really interesting. So yeah, if you do.
Sure. Just need to complete it. Still got to find, because obviously I've been in post for 8 years. So the person that prior to me knew the students that sort of he worked with, and it's just about trying to find those individuals and find the destinations as well. So it's just that's kind of sort of pushing it a little bit behind. But yeah, I'm hoping this year we will be able to publish that.
That'd be brilliant. So yeah, hopefully we can all read that, because I think we'd all be really interested to see the results. But we're getting some, I can see some people typing, and Julia said really helpful insights. Thank you so much for sharing. So yeah, thank you for taking your time out this afternoon to kind of give us a bit of insight. And I think it's really nice to see some student thoughts as well and student perspectives. So yeah, thank you so much, Sharon.
Most welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you everyone else for joining. I hope your questions were answered, but as Sharon said, if you have anything else that you think of later, do let her know. I'll send out sort of her email in sort of the comms that I send out, and I'll let you know when we've got this recording as well available on our websites. And I'd really appreciate it if you take the time to either drop us a comment on the comment board, or to fill in the evaluation form for today's session. That really helps us sort of planning for next year. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you have a nice afternoon.